be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
The Hockey Time Machine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Brain teaser. What do the Cleveland Barons, New Jersey Devils, and Tampa Bay Lightning have in common? The answer is if you turned on the radio to listen to the first game in franchise history for each of those teams, you would have heard the same voice, the voice of Larry Hirsch. This voice.
From the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan, this is New Jersey Devils hockey. Tonight, the New Jersey Devils meet the Detroit Red Wings. Hello, everybody. Larry Hirsch along with Fred Shiro from the Joe Louis Arena. And Fred, tonight, the New Jersey Devils take a winning streak, 2 games in a row. They've won 3, lost 1, and have tied 1 in their last 5. They have played exceptional hockey, and they are scoring goals and are hot.
They are playing exceptional hockey, as you say, Larry. And also, I believe the fans, our fans, are very proud of them. They should be. They're playing the game the way they should play. And if they keep playing the same way, they're going to move up in the standings.
Great game against the Hartford Whalers, trailing 3-1. They came back to win it by the score of 5-4. And this is a game that they have to win again here tonight.
And look, Larry Hirsch still has a microphone next to him. Hi, Larry. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And as general sayings go, it's a great day for hockey. So let's get going.
All right. Now, let's go ahead, go back to 1976, and you had a plan of attack for getting the Cleveland Barons job. So let's start there.
On my knees a lot. Threw money in the pot if I could, cooked meals. I did everything. From the Barons' origins come all the way back to Charlie Finley's days in the NHL when he brought the California Seals into the league. Everything didn't go well, and Charlie sold the team to the Swig family, or Mel Swig, who owned the Fairmont hotels in San Francisco. And I was the announcer for the American Hockey League's Minnesota North Stars team and also the California Seals team in New Haven, Connecticut, the New Haven Nighthawks. And I went to both Minnesota. Whenever I was going for an NHL job, which I did a lot of times, going up to Montreal, and when the meetings were held there and showing my wares. But these were the 2 teams that were connected to the team I was with, and I went out to both when the Stars were in Minnesota and when the Seals were in Oakland. And I found out when I went to Oakland that there was some problems out there, and the Swig family wasn't happy, the attendance, so on and so forth. So they decided. I heard that was the first time I heard Cleveland is a possibility. Why? Because it was a great hockey town, great AHL town. And, they just built a new building there, the Richfield Coliseum, out in the middle of nowhere. I used to, in the wintertime, put my car in first gear and slide all the way to the Richfield Coliseum. But it was outside it might not look good, but inside it was really the premier arena in America because it had suites, it had restaurants, it had everything, plus close to 19,000 for hockey. It was also the home for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So it was a gorgeous arena in the middle of nowhere. But the story behind that is Nick Maletti, who built the building, wanted the team in Cleveland, looking for money, didn't get it, said, well, the heck with you guys. I'm going to build it where I want to. And that's where, that whole thing in Cleveland came about. And Mel Swig moved the team from Oakland to Cleveland. I went out to Cleveland. I said I would buy the first season tickets if you give me the job. And but I went to people like Bill McCreary, who was the GM at that time. I knew Mr. Swig, so I already knew him. And I also knew Jack Evans, God rest his soul, one of my favorite Rangers, who was the head coach of that team at the time. And on September 1st, oddly enough, 76, when on my sister's birthday, I got a call from Cleveland saying, come on out. And that was it. At 26 years old, oh, you are really giving it to me tonight, guys. Look at that beautiful guy, in the middle. Look at the fashion design from the leisure suits back in the day, the big tie, my dark hair, which of course I've lost, and a little afro type of thing there with the mustache. And look at the old-fashioned microphone. How about that? So that goes back to the days when dinosaurs were still around. But wow, what a great day!
You look like Cleveland's Foster Hewitt there.
Well, but Cleveland paved the way for me to meet Foster Hewitt in the gondola, which I broadcasted from. And as much as I loved broadcasting from that, it was hellacious to get to, as you may or may not know.
And we'll get to your favorite away arenas later in our conversation. Okay. But just to reinforce your point about how Richfield Coliseum was halfway to Akron, which it was, there it is, teeny tiny in the upper right corner of this picture. So when you did get up close to it, it did look pretty darn good. In fact, some players nicknamed it the Castle. It had the biggest seating capacity in the NHL, but ended up with the smallest average attendance in the league. So what was that first year like?
Well, unbeknown to me, until I got to Cleveland and started seeing the landscape and the workings of Cleveland, the one thing I did know going into it was what I said before. Cleveland was an unbelievable American Hockey League town. In fact, my parents saw games in Cleveland that featured chicken wire instead of glass on the boards. That's how I got my introduction to hockey. But the Coliseum, like I said, you were right. It's halfway between Cleveland and Akron, Ohio, and that big highway, an interstate highway, was how you got there. And, I mean, in most places you had an arena with a city, so you can go out after the game and so on. It wasn't that way. I mean, we were out in the middle of nowhere and it was freezing. It was cold. But the thing is, that was what players saw, okay, from the outside. Once they went inside and saw how this building was, they were, the mouths opened up. I did my pregame show, which was a call-in show from a restaurant in the arena. I used to go into suites. People invited me into their suites. It was wonderful. And I'm looking at Bobby Stewart there, who was the captain of the Barons. And, it was just a tremendous, tremendous place. The problem was twofold. Number one, what preceded us in Cleveland was the WHA. And the WHA club in Cleveland, they had a lot of problems, a lot of problems. And they ticked a lot of people off. And we were the recipients of that anger the year that they stopped playing in Cleveland. And we had to overcome that. We had to overcome where the arena was. And we had to overcome a team that, while it was pretty good, not as good as the division that we were in with the Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs, and so on, Boston Bruins, so on down the line. We had to play these guys 6 times on an even schedule. And these guys would come in and just rock us to no end. But we had a good team. The fans that we did gather, anywhere between 9,000 and 10,000 on a fan base, they were tremendous.
The players on the Seals, before they became the Barons, were already used to all kinds of uncertainty, which can only make it harder when you're trying to concentrate for a game. And unfortunately, the move to Cleveland did not ease that financial uncertainty. Mel Swig, the owner, either didn't have the money or said he didn't have the money.
No, he had the money, but he was losing the money. That was the problem. And the problem also was that in Cleveland, we really worked hard. I mean, the greatest players in the game came in there. We had Joe Malash in net, who was an all-star, a great guy. May he rest in peace. He was a great goaltender. We had the 3M line: Dennis Baruch, Al McAdam, and Bobby Murdoch, Donnie Murdoch's brother. What a line that was! You know, Bob Stewart at defense. It was really a fun team. But unfortunately, the pressures were on. It wasn't a winning team per se. They played good hockey, but I mean, my God, look at the Pittsburgh Penguin uniforms at that time. But it was a great time. There's Jackie Evans. I love this guy. What a defenseman he was for the New York Rangers, Detroit Red Wings. What a wonderful coach. I had many happy and sad flights with him. I think the best line Jackie Evans had was that the Barons had won like about 3 or 4 games in a row on the road. So we were coming back, and the first team we were playing were the Montreal Canadiens. Okay, the Canadiens were champions. All the stars that you would want: Larry Robinson, all the way down the line, Guy Lafleur, and they would come in, and I just was fearful of that. So the press conference before the game, they said to Jack Evans, "Jack, how are you sleeping these nights knowing about this game?" Because there was a big buildup. He said, "Oh, no problem, guys. I sleep like a baby. I go to sleep. I get up 2 hours later, go get milk, crying, go back to bed, get up 2 hours later, crying." So I mean, that was Jackie Evans, and the players played a great game. In fact, they won a great game against Montreal, where I went through the orientation of players. Now, do you know what the orientation of players are? That is what is done. I don't know if you or Paul or anybody else, but do you know what the orientation? Well, for rookies, okay, they would come in and whatever, and the players would take them and they would pin them down and start to shave areas. Okay, I'll leave it at that. With me, now this was only players, okay, and I was ticked off. We were playing Montreal and whatever. And I walked in one morning to do my interview in the locker room, and all of a sudden, somebody said something to me, and I said something back to them. You heard the whole players go ooh like that. I went into the training room to get Jack Evans. He wasn't in there. As soon as I was coming out the door, a guy by the name of Randy Holt, tough guy, caught a hold of me and pounded me back onto the training table. All the players jumped on me. Holt, with wide eyes open, said, "Just relax." And they did the shaving, and in particular, they shaved off half my mustache. And so that night, and I left the locker room. I said, "You guys don't win tonight. You give me a lousy game to do, I'm going nuts." Okay? And they went out there and they won the game. The only problem was that during the game, I was itching terribly, as you can imagine. And I kept my half mustache on, just so that people can say, "Hey, what happened to you?" That's the story.
I knew about the Barons beating Montreal, but not those other parts of the story. And the reason I didn't understand orientation is because that's quite a euphemism. I would say it's closer to hazing. That I would have understood.
Well, let's not get political now. Let's just say that back in the day, hockey players had their own way of expressing you're part of the team. Okay? And this was one of the ways that they did it. Oh, practical jokes? Want me to tell you some practical jokes? I'll tell you that. I mean, they would go on a plane and see a writer, and maybe they didn't like the story, and they put shaving cream on his nose while he was sleeping, and then kind of tickle him and where his nose is, and then he would go whap, and the shaving cream go all over it. That's part of the stuff that went on.
You mentioned Gio Malash, one of the great all-time good goalies on bad teams for the most part during his career. But your Barons, they took a backseat to nobody when it came to masks, because look at that beauty. I mean,
Is that Don Simmons?
no,
Oh no,
we
that's
have
Shields. No, that's Shields. That's right. That's right. That's
okay,
right. I
because
see his
look,
27
here's
there.
Simmons who brought his snake
Now,
from California. I mean, you must have had the best mask tandem in the league.
well, the reason why I asked about him is that because of that snake, which he didn't take off. He wore that in Oakland, and he didn't take that off. And he also had he was a pre-runner to Billy Smith. Okay, anybody that got near him, whack, hit, smash, and Simmons had a thing called the claw. Okay, and if any player got under his skin, he would grab that player in a pile and put a claw on his neck. He threatened to do that to me one time, to which after I went to the bathroom said, "Thank you, no thank you." But he was a wild guy, and he was a good goaltender, really good goaltender, and so was Milosh. And you're right, the masks were great at that time. I'll never forget that snake mask. Never, never.
Let's talk about your broadcast partner in Cleveland, a Hall of Famer, Harry Howell, who was a star defenseman with the Rangers for 17 years and played 8 more years of pro hockey after that. He started as an assistant GM with the Barons, and he sat in with you on game nights, right?
That's correct. I grew up watching the Rangers. Harry Howell was the only defenseman of the year the Rangers had until, and I'm thinking about his name, but he was the man. His number is raised at Madison Square Garden. Harry was a great guy, and I loved him. And when he became my color man, I said, "Are you kidding me? Here I grew up with this guy, and now he's going to be my color man." And Harry and I had the best time, laughed like crazy, did a great job on the radio, told great stories, and then all of a sudden, Bill McCreary is fired, and they take him away from me. Why? Because he became the general manager. And I said to myself, I said, "Harry, if I have to criticize you, do I do it? In a what way do you want?" He said, "Larry, just remember, I broadcasted next to you. I have stories about you." And I said, "Fair enough, Howie. Fair enough, Harry." But I love the man. Really got to know him. Got to know his family. Uh, just wonderful, wonderful people, and what a great guy. Went on to scout for the Edmonton Oilers and so on and so forth. And I learned a lot of hockey under Harry. A lot of hockey under Harry.
The second and final season in Cleveland, the financial straits get worse. Tell me about the night you're hosting a sports talk radio show with Howell, who, as you said, has been elevated to general manager.
So it got so bad financially. Now, let me explain it this way. I don't know if this is the rule now. It was then. If an owner defaulted on a payment to the players, he had 2 weeks to pay the players that money. So, because of the financial difficulties and whatever was going on between the ownership and the National Hockey League, that was their thing. So, the owners, the Melswig, defaulted on the payment. So, it was my job, and the fans really were tuned into me with all the reports about all the things that were going on. So this one night, I'm doing a talk show when it seemed like things were really getting bad, and Harry was my guest, general manager, and the first 45 minutes or hour of the show was all about we're going to be fine, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, so on and so forth. And then the next hour, after setting up the fans and saying, "Okay, take it easy, they'll work out," Bob Stewart, the captain of the Cleveland Barons, calls me, says, "Larry, we haven't talked to the press. We haven't talked to management. We are talking to you first." And Harry was in the studio with me. he said, Larry, this is a breaking bulletin. Meaning we just had a meeting. The team had a meeting, and due to the situation with payments and everything like that, we're striking the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Thursday night. I think this was a Monday night. And I saw Harry and the blood leave his face when they said that. He had to run out and call the owner. And what started after that was just unbelievable, because in hockey in particular, but in sports, you don't hear about a team striking during the season. So, I started dialing numbers, and of course I was honored that Bobby gave me that. But what started out as an 8 o'clock show, I didn't get out of the studio until about 3 a.m. in the morning. Why? Because after the broadcast was over, there was a whole host of stations across this country and Canada that wanted the soundbite. And so I was feeding sound bites and everything, and that's all of a sudden Larry Hirsch has gone national and international. So that's kind of what happened. But what happened afterwards, if you're referring to that, is that several days later there are meetings going on in New York. I went to New York. I was in the suite of George Gunn, who was the owner at that time, and I was in the suite of Mel Swig, who was selling the team to the Gunn brothers, and I was getting incredible information. And I had it all done, and I told my radio station, because people were listening to us, please, once I get the scoop, I'm coming at you. All right, please, I want to be first. I've worked hard for this. Okay, Larry, you got it. The decision comes the next day, and the NHL puts up money to keep the team solvent. The Guns work out the deal with them, and with the NHL, and I run out of the press room. My sister is holding the phone with our radio station, so nobody else would use the telephone. I got on the phone, and folks, if you remember back to the days of Jimmy Carter, who was the president, because of all the fallout with Nixon and everything like that, he would do these press conferences fireside just to get people warmed up to him. And he would do it several times. Well, one of the times was this time that I had this breaking news. So I get on the phone with my disc jockey, and he says, "But Larry, we got President Carter." And it was one of those situations where you say, "I don't care if the President of the United States is on the phone, get him off." And he said, "Wait a minute," went back to the program director, came back on, says, "You got 5 minutes, Larry." That was it. They took the President of the United States off the air for one Larry Hirsch in Cleveland.
Now, after the Guns bought the team, no pressure, Larry, Gordon Gund would sit behind you during games, the owner, and listen to your broadcasts.
Well, I'd like to say it was because of my broadcast, but to be honest, Gordon suffered from a disability condition with his eyes, and he was going blind, and so he couldn't see, obviously. And when he came to Cleveland, he would have his guy, escort him up to our open air broadcast booth. We'd set up a headset for him, with a big extension cord, and he went behind us and listened to the broadcast. And for all the people that have not heard what I do on the air, as I put this under the category of don't try this at home, I did some crazy things, but I was really exciting. I was really accurate in my call, and it just made you feel like you were at the game itself, which is what I wanted. And Gordon listened to that, and when we scored a goal, I would look back at him and grab his hand, and said, "Goal, Cleveland Barons," or whatever it was. The time that cliche I used for that club was super. So it was super this and super that. And I grabbed Gordon and, "You're super, Mr. Gunn," and he loved it. And every time he came to the game, he wouldn't sit in a suite or seat. He came right behind me, and there was no pressure.
You weren't worried that the owner was within choking distance of you?
Oh, look, I knew who he was. I knew what he was representative of, but he was in, excuse my, with all due respect to the Gunn family and everybody, he was in my house. So in my house, you're going to feel comfortable, you're going to have fun, you're going to get excited, maybe a hot dog or two, and I'm going to put you in row A, seat one. And that's the way I carried on all my broadcasts.
When did it become clear to you that hockey in Cleveland, at least the NHL variety, was ending?
Right from the game one. I mean, no, you know, when you have an opening night and there are 10, 11,000, you know, as opposed to 19,000, that kind of tells you something there. But this unfortunate history with the WHA before the Barons got there, um, and the bad thing with Nick Milletti and the Cleveland Cavaliers, who we shared the building with. There was all sorts of politics going on, and we ran right into that. The lesson, ladies and gentlemen, that is learned from Cleveland and every team that I win, and that is this. This great game of hockey is exactly that. It's the greatest game. It's the best spectator sport in the world. And once people, as Phil Esposito once said, once we get you to the arena, we got you. All right. And that has held true. And what I'm saying is that's fine. And that's a great ingredients to have. But you can't hang out the shingle and expect people to come. You got to go out. You got to get them. You got to bring them. You got to do everything to make them a great night of it and carry it out in your marketing and everything else. And and that was another mistake that they made because they thought because Cleveland was a great hockey town that it would be a gold mine for them. That's what happened, and I've learned that lesson, and that's why I carry it into my broadcast. Take nothing for granted, nothing at all. Go out, get them to the arena, then we got them.
When the Barons merged with the North Stars and left you without a team to broadcast, eventually you relocate to LA as a local TV sportscaster. Did they even let you mention the Kings or hockey back then?
Oh, well, they had no choice because I was going to do it. The Kings were not LA's favorite team, obviously, most popular team. In fact, basically, that's how I got my career started. I took a tape machine up into the stands, all the way in the top behind the press box in the old Forum in LA, and I did hockey games from up there. Why? Because nobody was up there with me. So when they made the playoffs that first year, that was with Dion and Rogie Vachon and that whole crew, and they made the playoffs, and of course that's where really hockey took off in LA. And but I wanted to do a hockey game for my tapes, and I sat outside the Forum overnight with my law books, reading. I stayed overnight, learning that in New York when you stand online for tickets. Got the first good view, and I had to do that game on tape recorder with people around me. And I thought that was going to be a problem. I thought I was going to be kicked out. Actually, not. The fans really liked it. They said, "Hey, we're listening. You're right. You know, whatever." And that started the whole thing. You know, but um, like I said, guys, I'm not going to write a book on how to get a broadcasting job because my broadcasting career is under that banner of "Don't try this at home."
Nobody ever said to you, a news director or somebody, I hear the sound of televisions clicking off or changing stations when you start talking hockey.
Well, when I worked out at KHJ in Los Angeles, it was an RKO station, independent station, and I would do the weekend sports anchor, and I would do some reporting during the week. The Lakers at that time were gigantic. You know, they were the big show, and with Kareem and everybody there. So they were the winter sport. So, that's the first basic thing. If there was a Laker game that night, you had to go with the Lakers. But I would always look at the Los Angeles Kings, and I did several stories within those broadcasts showing the Kings, doing stories about Dion or Rogi Vachon, that whole group there. And they liked that. They liked it in LA because nobody had really paid attention to it before that, understandably. I mean, but it is a professional team. So that's what happened out there. And hockey never left any of my televised or radio broadcasts. Never. I always did it.
Did you get a sense that the Kings players, that it bothered them at all, that they were considered as an afterthought at that time in the LA sports pantheon?
Right. Well, when you skate before 8 or 9,000 people, that doesn't exactly get you, you get you motivated, which was basically the average attendance during these games. Now you see the Staple or whatever that center is, um, they're packed to the gills. But I was lucky enough that particular year when I was doing the games on my tape recorder, that was the year that they really made a push for the playoffs and made the playoffs, played the Chicago Blackhawks in the first round. And the place was packed. The Forum was packed. My problem was, how do I do a game on tape recorder with a person to the left, person to the right, people in the back, and so on and so forth. But it really kind of worked out. But from that point, from that playoff point forward, the Kings built a good team and went on to their successes in hockey. While maybe not still the number one viewer or whatever, it's it's nice to see that center packed out.
Before we move ahead to your Devils years, I forgot that you had a Barron show and tell that I want you to share.
This is part of the Larry Hirsch Museum of my history of my life. This is the only uniform I have. I don't have one with the other teams. This uniform, at 26 years old, I got this uniform. This is the old Cleveland Barons uniform. This was their uniform. Notice you had a C in the front and then the Ohio, state of Ohio, and then the B for Barons. And what was really cool, I thought, was on the shoulders, you would have the state of Ohio. And in this case, it would be, whoever's number with that was. And of course, this goes to the back, with Hirsch number 1. That really is one of my treasures. And I have a puck from opening night in each of the 3 teams I did. It's very personal to me. What I really feel bad about is I don't fit quite as good as I did back then into that uniform.
I can relate. Since we're doing show and tell, if your broadcasting daughter happens to wander by, make sure she comes into camera range so we can say hello to her as well.
Thank you, Glenn, because as we know, credits are very important. We show them all the time. All right. And I always, after every broadcast, acknowledged anybody that was working on our broadcast. My daughter is such a fabulous, multi-talented person. She's a dancer, singer, songwriter, hockey fan. And she's, when it comes to technology, I'm in the corner with the dunce hat on. All right. We would not be talking now. I would not be telling you any of these stories without her expertise. She's my technical director. She's, along with my other daughter in Seattle and my great wife, Susan, the loves of my life. I'm so proud of them. But I got to give her credit, and you do too, Glenn, for getting me wherever the heck you are.
Well, I'm not too far away from one of your daughters in Seattle. What's her name?
Her name is Stephanie.
Okay.
She started college as going off as a broadcaster, but she's smarter than me, and she's doing excellent public relations marketing work within the communities with inclusion and equity or inequity. She's marvelous, and she's well known in Seattle. I mean, she's known. She's really got a name, but she is a great. She won. In fact, let me just say this: she, in her sophomore year, was a soccer player and a goaltender. So I know all about goaltenders and their moods and everything. And she won in her sophomore year, the state championships in soccer, both on the high school and club level. And she got to try out with the U.S. Olympic team, and she loves soccer. So Seattle and the Sounders out there, just crazy. But I said to her, where do you get hockey there? Then you could talk to me. And I just say, okay, there's my evidence. And look how great hockey is in Seattle right now.
And now you have another daughter. What's her name?
Emily. And she's the technical director. Emily's the technical director.
Is she listening to the show?
I know she is. If she can come on in, Emily. And I told her I would want to introduce her, but like people behind the camera, sometimes they stay behind the camera. I don't know, but she blows my mind in the talents that she has. I mean, she's written some great songs, and she's both of them are the pride of my life.
Well, if she's listening, she's welcome to come interrupt us anytime. We'll go on with this nonsense, but if she wants to come in, we're happy to talk to her too.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, in 1982, the Colorado Rockies, who had begun life as the Kansas City Scouts, pull up stakes again. How did you end up joining them in the Meadowlands as the radio voice of the new New Jersey Devils?
Okay. If you remember, the owner of then Colorado Rockies was a trucking magnate from New Jersey, Arthur Imperatori. He owned the Rockies, and not a good club. Chico was on the club. You know, several people came over, obviously, to New Jersey. But Mr. Imperator obviously became disenchanted, whatever. And another New Jerseyite picked up the ball, John McMullen. There was a game at the new Meadowlands at that time. And they did a game between the Rangers and Flyers. And it was packed out. It was a preseason game. It was packed to the gills. Mr. McMullen, or Dr. McMullen, either way, he was a minority owner of the Yankees with George Steinbrenner. He eventually became owner of the Houston Astros. He was interested in bringing New Jersey's first professional team to New Jersey. And that is what culminated that deal. They moved to the Meadowlands, and the announcement is made. My wife, or then girlfriend, eventual fiance and wife, said to me, "Do you remember what you said to me, Larry?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know what." It says, "If you ever get a chance to broadcast in New York, I would love that. That would be my thing. Like a producer of a show. You go out of town, you do your thing. You come to New York, you better put your best foot forward." And I always told her that. And God love her, she had a friend of hers who was going out with somebody at the time who was very, very close with John McMullen. And he did business with my wife. And he said, "Susan, if there's anything I can do for you one day, let me know." She says, "Funny you should say that." And she, through him, set up this meeting with John McMullen. This was in June. The team, I don't think the ink was too dry at the time. And he invited me out to his country club. This was in June, to meet with him as a result of the meeting. And what happened was I went out there in a three-piece suit. It was 95 degrees outside, and I went to this golf club in on a Saturday, and I met him. We sat down. We really talked about hockey, about his team, so on and so forth. He said, "You would like to be the broadcaster of this team, huh?" I said, "Well, that's my specialty amongst marketing and other things that I had done, selling tickets and everything I had done in the minor leagues." But he said, "Who are the best broadcasters?" And I mentioned a few names. He said, "Well, where do you fit into this thing?" I said, I don't. I said, "I fit into my own outfit. What you see is what you get." Now, this was a one time only that I can get my point across. I was confident in my ability. I was confident in the situation, and I was confident in myself. And I said, I promise you, there were two things I promised him. I said, number one, I promise you, if you don't like what I'm doing, kick me the heck out. All right, fire me, kick me out. And then second, if you give me 3 years, I promise to be the best and most listened to broadcaster in the metro area. Because you had four teams. You had the Islanders, you had the Rangers, you had the Devils, and you had the Flyers. Okay. And you had all these great announcers. But if you give me 3 years, I'll do it. You know how long it took me? And I worked hard. 1 year. But 1 year, not because I was such a great announcer, but because I got the fans involved. I did things that were not done and are still not done. It just for a broadcast, it just put it out there, and that's great. Don't get me wrong, but I put toys and popcorn and stuff to get the fans involved. I had a call-in show in between periods with personalities so the fans can talk directly to them. All the fans that called in, we took down their names, their address. They got media guides, 2 tickets to a Devils game, and a sponsor, which was a fast food restaurant. We took care of their meals, and we took care of the game. In turn, they gave us the names and address. I would turn the addresses over to our marketing department, ticket sales, and everything, and it worked. It worked.
But you
So
skipped over a step.
what's that?
You had to find a radio station for you to broadcast on.
Well, that came a few days after. I got a call from Dr. McMullen. Said, now, Larry, we hired you to be our broadcaster, and you said you're a specialist, so we need a radio station. And I understood because the Rangers had this radio station, the Islanders had this radio station. You couldn't get into New York at that time for the October opening, right? So through my technician, Carl Infantino at the time, who was the chief of techs, literally, and the king of techs in New York and metro area, said, I got a friend who had that. I said, can I call him? He said, sure. So I called a guy by the name of Herb Salzman, who had a radio station in New Jersey called WVNJ. And I called him on the phone and I said, Herb, how are you? We did pleasantries. Then I said, Herb, would you be interested? I don't know what your format is, but would you be interested in possibly acquiring the radio rights to the New Jersey Devils new team? And, and then on the phone, I get kind of crickets, like, are you kidding me? Or is this a crank call or something? I said, no. Within 3 or 4 days, I met with him. The next day after I met with him, he met with Mr. McMullen, and we walked out of there with a contract with a radio station. And what we did, because, it was a 5,000 water, but it was directional and really good, especially it went into New York too. But we also built a network of 4 or 5 stations to go along with that in New Jersey. Amazing as it was, I've never done that before, but that was what I had to do in order for me to get on the air. So that whatever I had to do to get on the air, I did.
Alongside you on the Devils radio broadcast was none other than the former Flyers and Rangers coach, Fred Sherrow. What was Freddie the Fog like to work with?
Well, I'm going to change that name because I don't like that name for Freddie. And I know that name is out there. Yeah, you have fun and everything. But Fred was such an intelligent, intellectual man. He was well versed on anything. In fact, you know what his favorite sport was? Not hockey, boxing. He would talk hours to me about boxing, and I love boxing, so we talked. But Fred became, as I always like to, use names or cliches because papers do it and everything like that. So when Fred and I became the broadcasters, I became the master blaster because I blasted this game all over New York and New Jersey. And Fred became Dr. Hockey because he was Dr. Hockey. He knew everything. I see Sal Messina, who used to broadcast with the Rangers. He did some Devil games. Of course, Mike Emmerich, Mike and Mike was working for Spectrum that time in Philadelphia, and Gene Hart was there. Mike would fill in some games. and worked for Spectrum in Philadelphia. In fact, he did a game for me in New Jersey when I couldn't make it, and I called him up because I knew he was a terrific guy. I didn't want our broadcast to lose any value in professionalism and everything. And Mike did a broadcast for us. But we were the Master Blaster and Dr. Hockey. And that's the way it was. And not only that, but people that went to the game after the game was over would come to our broadcast booth. And anywhere from 10 to 60 people to line up to talk to us, but in particular, the doctor. And because we all knew what Fred Shearer was about. What I didn't know was the amount of hockey that I was going to learn from him, experience things that he went through, explained his background of being the only first NHL coach to coach in Russia. I mean, to be invited to Russia. And he saw things there that he took back. One of the things was an assistant coach with Mike Nikolic, who was his assistant coach in Philadelphia. And he saw how goaltenders were trained in Philadelphia on dry land before they even get to ice that. He saw that. And I forgot to bring it in. One of the items I used to have that I got in my AHL days was a Russian hockey stick. It has the Russian insignias on it and the hockey stick that was given to me by the coach at that time, Boris Kulagin. And he brought over the Red Army to play our minor league team. Fred taught me more about hockey, but you want to know something? The irony of the story is I had met Fred the year he won his first Stanley Cup. I was in Montreal looking for a job. And here was Fred all alone in the lobby of the Queen Elizabeth, nobody around him. And I went up to him with my tape recorder and said, Mr. Chiro, can I interview you? He said, sure, come with me. He took me to a small bar at the end of the hotel. We sat down there. I did the interview. And then 2 hours later, and all the diagrams that he did, he would look at me and say, we're going to do it again, Larry. I'm going to tell you. But this time, instead of Bobby Clark going into the corners, I'm going to get Reggie Leach to go into the corners. The heck with the goals. He's got to get his note. And I mean, that was before he did the broadcast with me. Then he does like Harry Howell. Then he does the broadcast with me. I love him. He was at my wedding. I love the man. I loved Marriott. I love Ray. I know Ray and John Paul. What a family. And I've got Fred Shearer stories that you would be laughing yourself sick upon. May I tell one?
Please do. Because let me just preface this by saying, and it may not have anything to do with your story, he is in the Hall of Fame. He was elected in the Builders category.
Not right away, though.
Well, many people think he was a genius and an innovator. There are others who find him divisive because his cup-winning teams in Philly were known more for destruction than building. So that's my preface. Go ahead with your story.
The roughness reflects the game at that time. Fighting, roughing, whatever. I mean, there were players without helmets on, goaltenders without masks on. Fighting was part of that time. One time, Eddie Shore came into a locker room in New Haven and was telling a story and about a guy who checked him hard and caused him to bleed. He said, I got a hold of that guy and cut him from here to here. I mean, that was hockey in those days. So Fred was able to take that, combine it with the great stars, Clark, Perron, the whole group. But you had Gary Dornhofer, you had Moose Dupont, you had people there that had everybody's back just in case somebody wanted to take a shot. And I mean, Fred was able to do that. Fred walked into our arena in Cleveland. They would watch our morning practice, and my players then would come out. I mean, the Baron players would come out. They'd look at the Flyers dressed in these black practice jerseys, and our team was beat right then and there before they even went on the ice. I mean, it was a combination of hockey, psychology, anything he can do to win a hockey game within the rules, which of course changed after Fred. Fred Shero's story. Okay, great story about Fred with all this stuff about intelligence and everything like that. Doing a game with him in Chicago, the old barn. And it was a week before the end of the season. Of course, we were out of the playoffs. But the following Sunday, which we broadcasted from the Meadowlands, was the last game of the regular season, and it was against the Islanders. And that particular day was Mother's Day. And Fred, I regardless of where I was, how I was, I always gave Fred the last word of our broadcast. So, like I do all the time, here I am in Chicago, finish up my stuff. I look at him and I say, Fred, you got the last word. He said, Larry, I want to tell you something. He said, next Sunday's Mother's Day, right? I said, yep. He said, we're having a game on Mother's Day, right? Right. We have a promotion, right? We're giving out mums to the mothers and everything like that, and it's going to be a wonderful day. And we're playing the Islanders. Now, the Islanders have a goaltender by the name of Billy Smith. Now, we all know about Billy Smith. He was pretty rough. Anybody came into the crease, forget about it. Slice him up into tiny little pieces, right? That's Billy Smith. That's their goaltender. In fact, he's so rough in the goaltender's crease, if his mother went into the crease, he would slice her up. And that's how he ended the broadcast. And I went, good one, Fred. That's our broadcast. Good night from Chicago. That's Fred. I mean, my heart pumps. I love the man. I love the man. He taught me
that is value for your entertainment dollar on the radio.
Please, we didn't have the team necessarily to back us up, but it was fun to listen to us.
Well, that's what you want to do for 3 hours. Forget your troubles and get involved in a sports event.
Hey, Glenn, when you're a broadcaster and you get a job in the NHL, do you say, oh, let's see, the Chicago Blackhawks, yeah, that's a pretty good team. I think I'll go for that if they give me the job. No, when my name was called, it was the Barons, it was the Devils, and it was the Lightning. And for a basic reason, because I got people involved in loving this great game. And that's it, because that's what I did when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and so on years old.
Sure.
So that's what I did.